The year is 1982. The place? The Boston Marathon, where a gutsy, relatively unknown underdog took on the renowned champion Alberto Salazar. They ran so closely together the final 9 miles that they'd monitor one another by watching the other's shadow on the steaming hot asphalt. The race represented not only one of the most exciting marathons in Boston history, but also a climax to each man's career. The depths to which each had to go in the final miles took such a toll that neither one of them ever ran as well again. Welcome to the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast, recorded from the Catalyst Ranch. I'm your host, Dr. Bradford Cooper of the Catalyst Coaching Institute, and today's guest is Dick Beardsley, the underdog who pushed the champion and himself further than either had ever gone. His story is captured in one of the greatest running books ever written, Duel in the Sun by John Brandt. From his difficult upbringing to his struggles with chemical addiction that eventually led to his arrest, and of course, reliving the Duel in the Sun, you are going to love this special episode to commemorate the 2022 Boston Marathon. If you haven't yet tapped into it, there's a link in the description to access what we call the Catalyst 5. It's a real quick, it's about a 30-second read, but it's a highlight each week of 5 tips, tricks, or turbo boosts that I've discovered along the way that might help you improve your either personal, professional, or both aspects of your life. If you'd like to join the thousands of people who are already receiving it, all you have to do is click the link, add your email, you're good to go. And of course, if it's not giving you that spark that you expect, it's a one-click unsubscribe. As always, if you have any questions about bringing best-in-class coaching to your organization, pursuing your own certification as a coach, or anything else coaching-related, please reach out. Email is results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com. We'll set up a time to connect. Now, it's time to be a catalyst with running legend Dick Beardsley on the latest episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast. Dick Beardsley, it is a pleasure. I love the book about you. It's one of the very few books that I've read multiple times. That's a rarity for me, but oh my goodness, this Duel in the Sun it's got everything. So thank you for joining us. Super excited about this.
Well, thank you, Brad, for having me on. I'm very excited about it too. And it's hard to believe that, in a month and a half, it'll be 40 years since me and Alberto Salazar had what they call the Duel in the Sun. And I can remember it like it happened this morning.
Wow. There was a lot to it. I think I would have wanted to put it out of my mind. I want to touch a little bit first on the Guinness Book of World Records that you're in for. You, and I'm not anywhere near your atmosphere of quality, but I've run plenty of marathons, done 11 Ironmans, that kind of stuff. So I know that world, and you're the only person to run 13 consecutive personal best times in the marathon. Now, folks listening, let me clarify this a little bit. We're not talking about somebody that went from 5-hour marathon down to 3 hours. He started at 2:47 and then gradually went down to 2:08 in the race against Salazar that we're going to be talking about. My friend, that is unbelievable consistency at such an elite level. How? Talk us through this. How did that happen?
Well, it's funny you bring that up, Brad, because I didn't even know there was such a category. In fact, my best friend from college, Mike Dunlap, he called me, this is a number of years ago, and says, Beards, you're in the Guinness World Record. I go, for what? Well, then he told me, and it wasn't something like I set out to do. It just happened that each marathon I ran my first one, the Pablo Nurmi Marathon in the little town of Hurley, Wisconsin, back in 1977. I ran 2:47, and I swore I'd never run another when I was 21
We all did.
old. Right. And then I ran another one a few months later, and after the second one, I really swore I'd never run another one. And it just kind of happened. And, when I look back now, the closest it ever came to almost not extending for 13 was I ran the Houston Marathon in 1981, January of 1981. I finished second to Bill Rogers. I ran 2:12:48. Well, then 3 weeks later, I was invited over to the Beppu Onita International Marathon in Japan, and it's their oldest, most prestigious marathon. It's like the Boston Marathon over here. So I went over there, and I finished third to a couple of twin brothers from Japan, and I ran 2:12:41. So it just, but again, it wasn't like
you weren't setting out to
went out to run a marathon. No, but I always went into every race just trying to run as fast as I possibly could. And the record is there. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. But the Guinness World Book of Records, they'll give you a world record for anything if you do something long enough.
Oh man, I love it. All right. So we just chatted about the fact this is 40 years this year since that incredible Duel in the Sun. Has you said you remember it like it was yesterday. Has your perspective on it changed over the years? Did you immediately feel this way and then 10 years later that way, and then now as we look back on it 40 years later, you're like, you know what? I just have a different outlook on what happened that day or the way I took that thing on.
No, I look at it now 40 years later, and really nothing's really changed. I still remember coming across that finish line and looking up at I happened to look up at the clock, and it was still reading 2:08 something. And half of me had never been so happy and excited about anything in my life. And the other half of me had never been so disappointed. I'm thinking, I just ran a 2:08 marathon, but I got second. And I remember getting back to my hotel eventually, and I'm soaking in the tub, trying to get rid of my aches and pains. And I thought, what could I have done differently? So I closed my eyes, and in my mind, I went back to the little town of Hopkinton at the start of the race and basically retraced every step of every mile from Hopkinton to downtown Boston to the finish line of what I could have done differently. And when I got all done doing that, I was smiling from ear to ear because absolutely nothing. I mean, I gave it my very, very best. And at the end of the day, whatever it is you do, when you give it your very, very best, how can you be disappointed in that? Would I love to say I was one time the champion of the Boston Marathon? Absolutely. But I tell you, I don't think there's anybody in sports that's got more bang for their buck for a second place finish than I have. So it's been fun. I get asked about it all the time, and I'm more than happy to talk about it because it brings back such good memories.
Yeah, if I remember correctly, the starting line played out a nightmare that we have all had in a marathon leading up. You were stuck behind however many people ran in 82, and you had to get up to the front where the elites start. And anyone who's run Boston, I've had a chance to do it 3 times. Anyone who's run Boston knows that is a mass of humanity, and they're stuck and they're not moving. And I mean, talk about endorphins and stress. Walk us through those moments. When I read that, I just thought, oh my word, are you kidding?
I know, Brad, I panicked. My coach, Bill Squires, had gone, and he was from the Boston area. He'd gone up a few days before and just started knocking on doors to find a place for me to just hide out. Back then, they didn't take you to a nice place for the elite athletes or anything like that, Yeah, no, nothing like that. And so he found this little old lady that had an extra bedroom, and she let me stay there. And so I'm lying upstairs in a bedroom, drinking lots of water, and I thought, well, I better go and get warmed up. Well, I didn't realize that where her house was on the back end of the marathon. Now, back then, it's not like it is today, but there were almost 7,000 runners, which was a lot of runners back then. Yeah. And there's this wall in front of me, and I am panicking. I'm thinking, I've never trained so hard for a race in my life, and now am I even going to get to the start?
Yeah.
And I can get along with a grizzly bear, and I'm very calm, but I start panicking, and I'm trying to get people out of my way, and I never tried to use my name to help anything, but I did that day. I go, people, please. I said, my name is Dick Beardsley. I got a chance to win this thing. And it was like the parting of the Red Sea. It just like people just opened up, and I got right to the front of the starting area just in the nick of time. But that's something you don't want to do on any race, but especially Boston.
Oh my gosh! I wish that were on video. That's amazing. Now, you mentioned as we were getting started, you said, hey, Brett, I'm an open book. I do want to talk to you about a few things because with our audience, health, wellness, performance, I think it could really be helpful to folks. Between 89 and 95, you were involved in several serious accidents that required pain medication and eventually led to being arrested for forging prescriptions. You've turned that into a huge positive to help other people. But could you walk us through that part of the journey and help us understand and where you've come from that time?
Absolutely, Brad. So after I retired from competitive racing and training, I moved back to my Minnesota dairy farm. And my whole goal in life was, to milk a bunch of cows, raise a bunch of kids. I've been a fishing guide since I was 12 years old and do that. And then on November 13th of 1989, I got in a bad farming accident. I got wrapped up in a piece of machinery, and it broke all my ribs on my right side, punctured a lung, broken arm, had my left leg almost torn off, and head contusions. And I was in the hospital for many, many weeks and multiple surgeries. But I recovered from that. And then about 2 years later, I got in a bad car accident. A person ran a stop sign on a country road and totaled my car, and I broke my back. And so I'm back in the hospital with more surgeries. And I got hit by a truck after I recovered from that, running in Fargo, North Dakota, and back in the hospital, more surgery. And then I was hiking by Lake Bemidji State Park, by where I live with my little boy, Andy, at the time. And the ground broke away up on this very high peak, and I fell off a cliff. I mean, it was just one thing after another. And I don't use this as an excuse, but I was on a lot of pain medication for a long time, and I got addicted to it. And when my doctor wouldn't give me any more, back then, I guess they called it doctor shopping. I'd go to another doctor, and then he'd give me some, and then when he wouldn't give me more, I'd go to another. Well, thank the good Lord, that's literally impossible to do now, because whether I get a prescription filled in Bemidji, Minnesota, or New York City, it pops up on a computer, and that's a good thing. And then when I couldn't, get any more doctors, I can't even imagine thinking about it, let alone actually did. But that's how powerful these gosh dang things are. I mean, I'd never been in any trouble in my life. I didn't smoke, didn't drink, never done any illicit drugs. I'd never stolen a piece of bubble gum. And I started to forge a doctor's name on prescriptions. And I knew I could go to prison. I knew I could lose everything that I'd ever worked for in my life. But at the time, all that mattered was to get the drugs, take the drugs, and make sure I didn't get caught. And thankfully, before I died, on September 30th of 1996, I got caught. And I knew I was in a lot of trouble, but I was so thankful and blessed that I was still alive. And I knew the only chance I had, if there was any chance at all to get better, was to be 100% truthful, take responsibility. And that's what I did. And I was given probation, and I got into a treatment program right away. And God willing, coming up on February 12th, it'll be 25 years. So,
wow.
But I would not wish an addiction on my worst enemy. What I had to go through, and what I put my family through, and then going through the withdrawals, even in a hospital, it was so brutal. It's hard to almost explain.
Well, and let's run down that path a little bit, because I think a lot of folks that have not had a family member, a friend, or themselves go down that path think, oh, come on, just pull, you're not disciplined enough. You're not what. And we're talking Dick Beardsley. If you've read the book, folks, this guy was like the most focused, disciplined. I did my PhD in mental toughness. You represented all the things that we discovered. I mean, you look up discipline and consistency and follow up in the dictionary, and there's your picture right there next to it. And yet you went through this addiction process. Can you help those folks? Can you help us all understand a little bit? It's not just discipline. It's not something you can just, it is so powerful. Can you help us understand that a little bit more?
Yeah, it is so powerful. And I was, I as I look back, I probably have an addictive personality, and that can be good if you harness it. I mean, I live in northern Minnesota, and even now I still run every day. I'm slower than molasses in January, but even back in my training day, heavy training days, I mean, I've run many days now and many days back then when it was minus 40 degrees actual temperature, and you just get focused and you don't miss a run. And even today, I don't miss a run. I mean, I get out there because I love doing it. And then when I got hooked on these opioids, when I was using them, they helped for what they were supposed to be. And then as you get better, then you don't need them as much. But, I kind of liked how they made me feel.
Sure. And
then I got to the point where, I got to the point by August of 1996, I was taking upwards of 80 pills a day of Percocet, Demerol, and I can't think. It's like Xanax. I can't think of the name of that other drug, but it's like a Xanax, And it's like when I do something, I either do it
all in
or not at all. And it was kind of like that with them gosh dang painkillers. Man, if I may as well take them as much as I can. But how I survived, the good Lord obviously looked out for me. I've got a very high metabolism, which helped a lot because it kind of processed those pills. But I remember when I got caught that day, and I had to meet with federal drug agents because I was writing myself so many prescriptions. They thought I was like dealing them.
Wow. And
when they told me that, I started blubbering like a little baby because, not one pill did I give or sell to anybody. I was too selfish. If I got them, I took them. But they, after meeting with them, they took me right to the hospital in Fargo, North Dakota. And right away they did blood work. And they were amazed at the amount of medication I was taking, how functional, all like kidneys, liver, all that stuff. And they said it was because I got such a high metabolism. Even today, I'll be 66 years old in a month, and I weigh the same as I did back in high school, maybe even a little bit less. So that was a blessing for sure.
Wow. Okay, you mentioned you've been chemical free since February 12, 1997. Is there any remote comparison between that battle and what it took to be a successful marathoner? Because it's a rough journey. The marathon's a rough journey. Obviously, it's compressed versus 25 years. But can you make any ties between those two?
Well, it's training for a marathon at the level I was fortunate to run at. Comparing to go through the addiction and getting clean, the marathon training was like a walk in the park. It really was. As hard as that was, going through an addiction and getting in recovery and staying in recovery, I have to be on the watch every single day. And I've had
now.
I've had 2 total knee replacements since 2009. And so for a short period of time, I had to be on some narcotic pain medication just to deal with the surgery and then the rehabbing so you can get to where you can straighten and bend your leg again. And that was brutal. But this time there was a plan. And my wife, Jill, came to all my doctor's appointments and made sure that the doctor knew about my past. And I remember the first time I went in for a knee replacement and we had to meet with the surgeon. And I go, hon, don't tell him about the past. She go, oh no, he's going to know about the past. I go, hon, they probably would just tie me down on the table and not even knock me out and just start cutting into my leg. She goes, they're not going to do that. And so we told the doctor, and he said, Dick, he says, I appreciate your openness. He goes, we will not let you get addicted. You're going to have to be on some narcotics for a short period of time. So we had a plan with the doctor. And then when I got home from the hospital, if I needed a refill, only my wife Jill could call for a refill.
Okay.
Only when we talked to our pharmacist, only she could go to the pharmacy and pick them up, and only she could dispense them to me. I had no idea where they were. And people say to me, they go, you mean to tell me that you couldn't have done that on your own? I said, I probably could have, but I can't 100% guarantee that I could. If I had a jar full of those pills, I honestly don't know if I could just take the recommended amount that they want you to take without taking more. And that kind of keeps you on that, like, wow, that's 25 years later. I mean, that's how powerful it is. Okay. So I just always got to be on the watch. So, with marathon training, like now, I run every day, but I just go out and run. I don't train anymore. I run every day. And like I said, I'm slower than molasses in January, but I still love doing it, and that's the neat thing about this sport of running is if you choose, you can do this for as long as you want to do it. And I remember when I retired from that competitive elite running, back then, and I remember a lot of people telling me, oh, you'll quit running now, or you'll never run another race again because you'll be so disappointed never being able to get back to that level.
Sure. Yeah.
That never, and for me, that never ever bothered me. But I know a number of the guys I used to compete against, they quit running and they haven't run another step since because of that. Right. And I thought, oh, they're missing out on so much because I get so much enjoyment out of it.
Yeah. Folks, actually, describe some of your training, because I'm thinking back, and this is testing my memory here, but I think in the early 80s, it was not uncommon to be running 120, 140 miles a week. I remember your quad tapping thing that you would do X number of times. And I was thinking, I was just down at a conference last week, and the physical therapists are now selling all these little things that go da 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 da. So I think you and your coach were about 40 years ahead of the curve on that one too. But just walk us through, what was training like at the elite level in the early 80s?
Yeah. So back then I would have a period from December, January, February, and March, where I'd average about 140 miles a week. And it was mainly going out and doing just long, hard runs. And once a week, because of where I live, I would try to find a drier type of pavement. I do a little fartlek or something like that. And then when I got to March, end of March, when the weather would start to break a little bit, roads kind of got rid of the snow and whatnot, I would drop the mileage down to maybe 120 to 130, but then the intensity would start to pick up. And so a typical week for me, every Sunday, I would do a 22 to 24 mile run. And it wasn't just going out and getting a run in. I mean, I would take everything that Coach Squires, my coach who was out of Boston and I was here in Minnesota, I would take everything I did those previous 6 days, incorporate them into a 22 to 24 mile run. And I mean, it was Hammer City. And I mean, there were many times. I remember before I ran my 209 at Grandma's Marathon in 1981, 11 days before, Coach Squires had me go out and do a 24 mile long run. And he wanted me to run like the first 5 miles at 5-minute pace, then back off to 5:20, then 5, and then the last mile, he wanted it like under 4:40. So I was flying. Let's just say this: by the time I got done, if I would have gone for 2 more miles and I felt great, I would have run like 2:11 in a practice that day. So I knew I was ready. Yeah. And I remember I was so excited when I got done. And I remember that night I called Coach Squires on the phone and I was telling him about my workout. He just started screaming at me on the phone. If he could have put his hands through that phone and grabbed me by the neck, and he's screaming at me. And then all of a sudden he's going, Dickie, just calm down. And I'm thinking, me calm down, Coach? Well, you know what he thought? He thought
you left it
there that day.
Yeah.
And thankfully I didn't. But so Sundays was a long 22 to 24 miler, everything mixed in that run. So it went by very quick because you're always changing something up. And then I'd always do a 3-mile easy jog in the afternoon on a out in the woods or on a golf course or something, just to kind of get ready for the next day.
Right.
And the next day would be, a couple of runs, probably put in a 10 miler in the morning and a 6 to 8 miler in the afternoon. Tuesday would be some kind of a faster session, whether it be, fartlek. I did a lot of, I really went to the track. Because I was a road runner. And so I did most of my speed work in the form of fartlek out on the roads because, you're going up and down and things like that.
And just real quick for our listeners who aren't familiar with fartlek, it just means speed play. And it's what Dick's describing, that you're not on the track. You're maybe on the road and you're picking out a telephone pole or a 2-minute period, or, I'm going to do this for 4 minutes or whatever. So fartlek is speed play, but it's not with a track. It's on the road generally. So I'm sorry, keep going. I just want to make sure people knew what that word was.
But no, and I should have explained that, Brad, because that's exactly what it is. And then I always did 2 runs a day. And then Wednesday would be kind of a medium long run, 12 to 16 miles. And, I look back and, I made some mistakes. I mean, even on my easy runs, I thought if I wasn't out the door at sub 6-minute pace, I'm wasting my time. And I look back now, if any mistake I made, it was that on those easier days, I didn't run easy enough.
Right.
And
but we didn't know that back then.
Be a medium. No, exactly.
Right.
That's exactly right. And then Thursday again would be some kind of more intensity, speed play, something like that. Friday was kind of an easier day. And a lot of times back then, many of us, we were running a race every week.
Right.
And I would run all kinds of, 10Ks, 10 milers. And they would just be, I rarely tapered for them because it was part of my, of my training schedule. And I don't care what you do on the track and simulation. There's nothing like getting in a real race and bumping elbows with people. And there's something even to this day, when I pin a number on the front of my singlet, I mean, like in the winter now, I'm running like 11, 12-minute miles. Honest to gosh. And when it's not all snowy, I run probably, like 10-minute miles, something like that. But I get invited to some races to speak at, and I'll jump in a half marathon, and yet I can run about 1.5 to 2 minutes faster in a race, and it feels easier.
Yeah.
It's just something that's magic about pinning that number on. And then, so I would do usually a race, or if not a race, some kind of a harder session on Saturday, and then boom, that back to that long run, hard run Sunday. And even if I ran a race on Saturday, I never missed. I was still out hammering on that Sunday long run. And I look back again, it's like, golly, I was really beating myself up, but. I guess that's one thing I learned, that if I could have done anything different, was to have just taken some of those days and just run easy. Yeah. And I never took a day off unless I absolutely had to, because maybe I got sick, or I got dinged up a little bit, had to take a day off or whatever. But otherwise, 2 days or twice a day, 7 days a week.
Wow.
Crazy.
Have you tuned into Kipchoge's work with Nike on that 2-hour project? Have you been following that came to a forefront the last, 3 years or so?
Yeah. I mean, first off, the guy is like Tom Brady in football.
He is.
He's the GOAT. He really is.
There's no question.
And I've never met him, but he seems like such a wonderful person. He's always got a smile on his face.
Always.
And like in the Olympics last summer, I mean, he just kind of sat there, and when he decided, okay, it's time to go.
I'm done. Here we go.
He's amazing. And I watched that race when he broke 2 hours. And, and I heard from a lot of people, well, yeah, but he had everything set up for him, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, he did. But you know what? He still had to put one foot in front of the other.
At 4:37 pace.
That just blows me away. When Alberto and I ran, he ran 2:08:51, I ran 2:08:53. That was the first time 2 men had ever gone under 2 hours and 9 minutes in the same marathon. And I look back now at like what all these guys are running, to win a major now, you got to run 2:03 at least. I mean, we'd have been like 1.5 miles behind. That just blows me away. Now, I think, this whole shoe issue that's out there now,
Sure.
That definitely, I tell you, as I've been with the New Balance Shoe Company since 1979. I'm like their Walmart greeter now. I go out and I'm like an ambassador for them. But they sent me a pair of the of those shoes with the
with the carbon plate, right?
Yeah, carbon plates. I'm telling you, it's amazing.
It is different.
You just walking on them.
Yeah.
I mean, and when you run on them, they are definitely pushing you forward. Even in my old gimpy stride that I have now, they're amazing. So not to take anything away from the athletes, because, the training's so much better now and the nutrition and everything. But Kipchoge, I mean, when he broke that, and it looked like he could have kept on running. I mean, honest to gosh, it's just amazing. It really is.
Yeah.
Who knows? I mean, I remember it was just a few years ago, people say there's no way anybody could ever possibly run under 2 hours. Yeah. And yet he did it. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. It's fun to hear
your perspective. The gals are running now.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're 2:14 world record. That's just crazy.
I know. Yeah. It is truly amazing. You had a fun tweet recently where you said, prove yourself to yourself, not others. Is that a lesson you've learned the hard way over your lifetime, or has that always been you?
It's pretty much always been me. I've never tried to go out like in running, say, and, I got to do this for my coach, or I got to do this for my family. It's like, I'm just going to go out and do the best I can. And if anybody's going to be disappointed, it's going to be me. But like I said earlier in the podcast, if I know that day I gave it my best, there's some days you're just kind of off. I'll never forget I missed the 84 Olympic trials because I blew up my Achilles tendon, couldn't run for a couple of years, and they rebuilt it twice because I snapped it again. And so I thought, I'm going to give it one last shot for 1988. So I remember going out to Hoboken, New Jersey. It was right on the other side of New York City, the 88 Olympic marathon trials. I had bib number 1, and I was in pretty good shape, I thought. And at about 5 miles in, I just started falling off the back end of the lead pack. And I felt like I was dragging a plow, and we weren't running. We were like 5-minute pace, maybe just a tad faster. And I remember Greg Meyer and Randy Thomas dropped back to me and they go, Beards, come on. I go, guys, I said, I'm doing the best I can. I said, but don't let me mess up your race. So they got back up there. And as each mile went, it got to the point where I couldn't see him anymore. But I was going to finish that race. And my goal going into that race was, I'm either going to make the Olympic team or this is my last marathon as an elite runner. And if I had to crawl on my hands and knees, I was going to finish this. And I remember getting to the 23-mile mark. There was an aid station there, and they had a big sound system going, and they had the local radio station on, or whoever that was covering the race. And they were interviewing the 3 finishers that made the Olympic team, and I still had 3 miles to go. Wow. But when I crossed the finish line, seriously, I was smiling from ear to ear because, Brad, honestly, I knew that was the end of my elite running career, but never in my wildest dreams did I ever think running would ever take me to where it did. I mean, I never made it to the state meet in Minnesota in cross country or track. Wow. And now, I go to a little college, and now here, and so I was smiling from ear to ear. And I look back, the only thing, and it's not a regret, but the only thing I really wish that I could have been able to do, and because I get choked up, because it would have been such an honor to have that USA across my jersey. And people say, well, yeah, but you ran so much over internationally anyhow, you represented the US in that way. And I said, well, yeah, but it's not the same as wearing a uniform that has USA on it. That would have been that would have put the cherry on top of the pie. But it never happened. But no, I mean, if you would have ever asked me if my running would have ever gone this far, I would have thought you were crazy. So it gives those young kids that maybe aren't real good, maybe it gives them a little glimmer of hope to hang in there, and you never know where it might take you.
Okay, so I love that. I want to come back to what you've said a few times about if you give it your best, then you're good. How do you know? Like, do we ever give it our best? Isn't there always a little something better I could have done in my marriage, in my work, or like, what's your perspective on that? My wife and I talk about this all the time. Is it the best I know how to do with where I'm at this? Like, I don't know. Just develop that out for us a little bit more.
Yeah, I think, that's a really good question. It's a hard one to answer because you just kind of know, at the end of the day, if I know that, I was able to help my wife Jill with some things and help somebody else with something and get some of the other things done. And maybe I didn't get everything I wanted to get done today. But at the end of the day, I look at it that, well, I did the best I could for today. And tomorrow's another day, and we'll tackle that. And that perspective, I don't know. I've had that as long as I can remember. And where my wife Jill, she can kind of get upset with herself. She likes lists, and if she doesn't get done with her list at the end of the day, she's discouraged. And I'm the one that goes,
I'm with you, Jill.
Yeah, and a lot of people are. And I get to the end of the day, and I go, well, I got most of the things done, and I'm happy with that. I just ran out of time, and tomorrow's a new day, and I'll get things, I'll work on it tomorrow. And if I don't get it all done tomorrow, well, then I'll work on it the next day. And I've always taken that perspective, and maybe it's because of, maybe it started happening later when those accidents and the hospitalizations and the surgeries and almost not being around anymore. It gives you a different perspective that life's too short to have everything on a list and be upset with yourself if you don't get it all done in one day. Enjoy the day that you're in. And, nobody ever lived a day longer worrying about tomorrow. And just, do what you have to do today to the best of your ability. At the end of the day, before you put your head down on the pillow, look back and say, hey, I did my very best today. And I've always had that for as long as I can remember. And I mean, it works for me. It might not work it wouldn't work for my wife, Jill, but it works for me. And,
but I think you're onto something there. I think there's a lot of wisdom what you just said you're talking about living our best, not checking the most things off. And I think there's a subtle but important distinction there of you're saying, did I live the best day I could today? That's different than, was I the best robot that I could be today?
Exactly. Yeah. Yes.
Interesting.
And I tell you what, I think what really, really brought that into perspective for me, and I really live by that even more now than ever before. I lost my son Andy 6 years ago, and he was an Army veteran of the Iraqi War, and he was a gunner on Black Hawk helicopters. And he was there for about a year and a half and saw some things, had to do some things that were very unpleasant. And when he got back, he suffered from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. And 6 years ago, my son Andy took his life.
Wow.
And, we've talked about, how hard it was for the training, for the, back in my elite days, and then the addiction and recovering from all the surgeries and stuff. And as hard as those things were, losing a child, there's nothing a parent or person can go through worse than that. Andy was supposed to bury me, not me bury him. And it would be easy to just wallow in sorrow and whatnot. But that would be the last thing my son Andy would want me to do. And so I try to live every day to the fullest, knowing that I don't know if nobody's guaranteeing you're going to be here tomorrow. And so I try to live it to the best of my to my ability and enjoy things. And when things don't go right, okay, it's one of those days, but the sun's going to come up tomorrow. And what leaves me with peace and joy about Andy being gone is knowing that someday again, I will be able to give him a big hug. And that's comforting and gives me much peace with that. So, sorry about that. Didn't mean to.
No. I mean, that's exactly what we're talking about.
Like that, but
no, that's. Yeah, I can't imagine. And that's exactly what we're talking about. This best doesn't mean more. It's best in the full perspective. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So your partner in crime in the book, or your big competitor, Alberto, he's made a few questionable decisions as a coach over the past decade and potentially more. Were you surprised as you saw the news about him come out, were you surprised, or were those maybe just an extension of some decisions potentially he was making as an athlete all along? As I read about some of the workouts that John describes, that he would go out and run the mile and then set the 10K record and then run the marathon. I can't help, I'm not putting words in your mouth, I can't help but think, was he ahead of the curve on maybe some questionable things that would allow him to recover like that, because those things were available in the 80s? Were you surprised by the news?
Yes.
What's your perspective?
Yes, they were. Well, I was, Alberto and I, over the years after that race had become quite good friends. I mean, right after the race, we were both young bucks at the time.
Sure.
He said some things in the media, and I did too. We probably shouldn't have. Knowing we're going to have to face each other someday. But over the years, we've become good friends. And I mean, there was rumors that some of those athletes that ran for that particular group back then, were kind of maybe perhaps using some things that they shouldn't have been using. But then, back then there wasn't the testing, and and it's easy to say something. And then when things started happening with, a few years ago with his athletes, and he got banned from the World Championships and a 4-year ban, and I remember hearing it right away. And because I had the BBC call me and wanted me to get my perspective on it, and I wasn't going to comment because I didn't know the facts or anything, and it wouldn't surprise me if Alberto, because he was an intense athlete and he was always looking for an edge for himself and then for his athletes. I tend to not believe that he would do anything that was illegal for him or the athletes, but it wouldn't surprise me at all if he pushed it right to the edge. And maybe there's that little bit of a gray area, because that's the kind of person he is and was. He was just looking to try to, just be a little bit better than he is or was, or his athletes were. And but then as you hear more and more things coming out now, you don't know who to believe. And I feel for him. I mean, I went through that media crunch back when I got addicted to the painkillers, and it made news all over the country. And it's hard to deal with that, because everybody wants to know what's going on. And not only is it hard on that person, but their family, they're kind of in the scrub of it all too. So, I want to believe that he just kind of pushed it maybe a little bit too far. And, but who's to say? I get Alberto's the only one that knows that for sure.
Right. All right. We are releasing this episode on Patriots Day 2022, which every runner out there knows is Boston Marathon Day. Any unconventional tips for all the runners that are listening to enhance their training or racing? You've been at the elite of the elite. You still hang with some of the runners. I'm sure you chat with them. You're following Kipchoge's work. Any tips that maybe people haven't heard before?
Well, they probably heard this one, Brad. It's hard to give a tip on marathoning now that hasn't been out there. There's so much out there with the social media now. But, there's still a lot of people that have never run a marathon, but are wanting to, and are probably going to be running some this year. And like I tell people, if you think you're going out slow enough at the start, you're probably going too fast, because you know what it's like, Brad. Well, you've run it before. You're jacked up.
Yeah.
You've tapered down. You've got all this extra energy.
Well, and you're going downhill that first mile.
Oh yeah. Oh, in Boston especially.
Yeah.
And and you look at your watch, you're thinking, man, I'm a minute ahead of what I should be, but I feel like $1,000,000. I guess I'm in better shape than I thought. Oh,
no, you're not.
No, you're not. And Boston can eat you up. And everybody talks about that infamous 4-mile stretch of hills from 17 to 21 with the big one, Heartbreak Hill. It's not the uphills that get you at Boston. It's the downhills. Yep. That's why back in the day when I was training for Boston, I'd hammer my quads with my fist, 1,500 to a couple thousand times a day to try to toughen them up. And if I can recommend anything for people that are going to run Boston, and you still got time, is practice, get your body used to that downhill pounding. Like when I was getting ready for Boston, how most people do a hill workout, they run hard up the hill and then kind of jog back down. I did it just the opposite.
That's perfect.
I jogged up the hill and hammered down to get my legs used to that pounding. And if you can do that, you're going to be way ahead of the curve. That's for sure.
That's brilliant. It makes perfect sense. My background, I'm a physical therapist. That makes incredible sense in terms of the eccentric contractions. I mean, that's great advice, folks. You take that one to the bank. You now run a fishing guide business. You're a motivational speaker, and everyone listening to this is like, oh my gosh, this guy's motivating. So good choice on that. I've never been much of a fisherman. Could you combine your two current occupations and motivate me to want to fish? Let's try this out a little bit.
Okay. So Brad, if you came to my home here in Bemidji, Minnesota, in the winter we call it Bemidji, because last week we had 2 days in a row when it was minus 40 degrees actual temperature. And we got 3 feet of ice out on the lake I'm looking at right now. Bemidji, we have over 400 lakes within 20 miles of town.
Wow.
And we're right on the edge of the Chippewa National Forest. It's breathtaking. And fishing and catching fish almost becomes secondary. We've got more nesting loons in this part of Minnesota than any other state in the country. And I don't know if you know, it's the Minnesota state bird, and they're gorgeous. And you hear them, the cry and the call of the loon will give you shivers. And there's many mornings when I've got people out on a little lake back in the woods, and you'll hear the loons calling. And a lot of times they'll pop up right next to your boat. You might you might see a moose walking along the shoreline. If you're lucky enough and you fish late in the evening, you might hear, we have a lot of timber wolves up here. You might hear the timber wolves howling. How many people have ever heard that? And then you just might catch a gosh dang big old fish. And, it's funny. I get a lot of people from big cities that have never fished much before. And I get them back on one of these little lakes back in the forest. And some of them are a little freaked out because the serenity and the quietness. They don't hear cars and airplanes. All they hear is an eagle screeching or the loons calling. And you would come to our area, and when the end of your rod starts bending and you feel something jerking on the end, I guarantee you will be smiling from ear to ear, and you will be hooked. You will be hooked, not just a fish, for life. Honestly, I've been fishing since I was 2. I started my own fishing guide business when I was 12, and I've had customers, many of them for 30, 40 years. And every year when they come back, they say, Dick, you're getting up there in age. When are you going to retire from being a fishing guide? And my stock answer, and it's from the heart, is I say, I'm going to retire when 2 things happen. When I'm driving folks to the lake in my truck and I don't have butterflies in my stomach, and when I'm out in the boat and somebody in my boat catches a fish and I don't get great joy from that, I said, that's when I'm going to retire. And I cannot imagine that happening. As long as I can still drive, have my senses, and can still feel that rod in my hand, why would I want to retire, Brad? You know what I do? I'd be fishing. So why not help others get the enjoyment I get out of it?
Well, everybody, I think he's successful on this. What do you think? I think I'm convinced. That was actually pretty cool. Last question, Dick. This was so much fun. Any last words of wisdom for life for people listening out there and they're excited by it? They can feel your energy come through their headphones. Any other little tips that we haven't teed up here, just for life?
I'm going to leave you with something that I've tried to follow all of my life. And it's helped me through some great joys in my life, and it's helped me through some great tragedies that have happened. And it's 4 simple things. And if you do these every day, at least for me, it really helps. And these 4 things are this. I'll try to do it without getting choked up.
Take your time.
When I wake in the morning, I try to wake up with a smile on my face, enthusiasm in my voice, joy in my heart, and faith in my soul. And those 4 things have gotten me through some major things in my life. And hopefully they'll help our listeners if they're in a little deep with something that's going on in their lives also.
Love that. Can you say those 4 again for us?
You betcha. When I wake up in the morning, I try to wake up with a smile on my face, enthusiasm in my voice, joy in my heart, and faith in my soul.
Wow. Dick, thank you for sharing all 4 of those with us today. This was so fun. I knew it would be, I think it would be good. I loved the book so much, but this was just fun. It's like talking to an old friend, and man, you got me fired up, and I'm the one that usually fires everybody else up. So great job.
Listen, I can sit here and chat with you all day long. So I feel like I found an old friend here. So thank you so much for having me on. It's been really a pleasure.
I love books, but I almost never read them twice. Dick's story in Duel in the Sun is one of the exceptions. I'd always take it with me to read in the days leading up to the Hawaii Ironman World Championship to provide that extra boost. I hope you enjoyed our chat. Thanks for tuning into the #1 podcast for health and wellness coaching, and thank you so much for sharing it with others. We don't do any advertising. It is growing only thanks to you passing it along, so we really, really appreciate it. Next week's episode, it's going to be a little different. I turned 56 that week, and I thought it might be interesting, we'll find out, for me to pull back the curtain on my own health and wellness. I'll be sharing details of my most recent blood work, some other tests, as well as the strategies, routines, that kind of stuff that I've been utilizing across the spectrum of health, wellness, and performance. And I'm hoping maybe it'll provide you with a few ideas for your own life. I've never done this before, so we'll see how it goes. You can let me know. As always, feel free to reach out to us with any questions about your current or future coaching career at results@catalystcoachinginstitute.com, or you can tap into additional health, wellness, and performance resources on the website, catalystcoachinginstitute.com. Now it's time to be a catalyst. This is Dr. Bradford Cooper of the Catalyst Coaching Institute. I'll speak with you soon on another episode of the Catalyst Health, Wellness, and Performance Coaching Podcast, or maybe over on the YouTube coaching channel.